Hi guys, my name is Bobby. Welcome back, and today I'm going to be doing my May wrap-up. Now, May was a shithole month for me. I slumped super bad, like really, really, really bad, to where I didn't really get that much read. I slumped so hard, I just didn't even have the desire to pick up a book and read. It was just, the thought of reading just made me, and a lot of it was because the books I read were not making me very happy, so I just didn't feel the need to read. Instead, I binged watched a lot of crap and, was running around all the time. And that's another problem. I was so tired from running around constantly between my work schedule and Danielle's softball schedule. It was just a mess. It was terrible. So I'm going to get into the books that I read, which there is 3 that I read, 2 that I partway read, 1 that I kind of half read, and the other 2 were DNFs. So let's get into it. The first book I read in the month of May was one of 2 nonfiction books that I read this month. Who the fuck am I? Nobody knows. But the first one I read was called The Five: The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper by Hallie Rubenhold. This was a very fascinating book. I saw, what's his name? Simon from Savage Reads talk about this book, I think in April? Something like that. And it was like one of the first books he talked about, and I was like, oh my god, I have to have that. She focuses on the 5 women who were killed by Jack the Ripper. She doesn't talk about the murders at all. Like, none of the details of the murders or who they thought Jack the Ripper was, none of that. Her entire focus are on the women, each individual woman, and what their life was like from birth until their deaths. So it's more of a focus on what women of the Victorian era, like what the shit they had to go through and some of the horrible, horrible things they had to go through and what it was like living in 1800s London when it was severely overcrowded, and it was really, really good. It was very compassionate. It was all about the women and to show that they weren't all prostitutes like a lot of people have led to believe, like the historians and stuff. A lot of them have said, oh, all these women are prostitutes. According to her research, only one of them was. The rest of them were not. They were just kind of down on their luck. Like the first woman, Polly, she was the first victim. She wasn't a prostitute at all. She came from a very religious, very, not well-to-do, but like a very hardworking family. She was a daddy's girl. She got married and, everything was going normal. She got married. They moved into this really nice, newly built apartment complex. And, she raised, how many kids did she have? I think it was like 6 or 7 kids she had. Not all of them lived to adulthood, but I think like 5 of them did. 4 or 5 of them. Like it was, normal family life for this time. Well, her husband started cheating on her with a widow or the daughter of a neighbor, something like that. But a little bit younger, I guess more attractive to him or whatever. He started cheating on her, and she ends up pregnant with this kid. And back in these days, it's like a woman had very little rights, and it was very evident in here that women really had no rights at all. And because her husband's cheating, she can't leave him because it's against the law pretty much for her to leave him, and cheating is not considered a good enough reason. Like the only way, like there was, I can't really remember, there was some stipulation where you could get away with it. Oh, if the man says that the woman was cheating on him, he could divorce her in an instant, but for a woman, there was no way cheating was not considered grounds for a divorce. So, I mean, it was just insane. So she made the difficult choice to just leave her family because she couldn't handle it. So she just left her family and left her kids behind, and that's another thing. She couldn't take her kids with her. And she ended up living in these, like, hovels, like, partially on the streets, partially in these workhouses and all that stuff. And it was a very, very hard life. Very dirty, very just gross and terrible. And that's how she became a victim of the Ripper. And it had nothing she wasn't a prostitute at all. And it was very interesting following these women's lives and, like, just learning about them. Because everything you read about Jack the Ripper, it's always about him. It's always about the crimes and the murders and, like, how gruesome they were and how they couldn't figure out who did it and all that stuff. And it never really focused on who these women were. It's like, the victim, we're just forgetting about the victim and glorifying the killer. That's what's happened for many, many years. And this book sheds light on every single victim and gives them a voice and gives them their stories. Like, let their stories be heard. It was really, really good. I rated it 3.5, 4 stars. Like, it's kind of hard to read at times. It is a nonfiction. She tries to write it so it reads like a story, but it's nonfiction. So like you really, I mean, some of the terms, like the old Victorian terms are, you know, kind of hard to understand sometimes, but I really, really enjoyed it. If you really like Jack the Ripper or anything in that kind of vein, I highly suggest you pick this up because it was really fun. Well, how as fun as, you know, 5 murders can be, but it was really interesting to find out about the women that he killed and not only knowing about him and the murders, but I felt really sorry for these women. I really felt for them, and I'm really glad I don't live in Victorian London. The next book I read in the month of May was one that I pre-ordered, and I read it the second it hit my doorstep, and that's Aurora Rising by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. But I've been highly anticipating this book. This, J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman wrote the Illuminae files, and I read those partially last year and into this year. Absolutely love those. So this is their first, I think this is a new trilogy. It's called the Aurora Cycle. This is book 1. Book 2 has been written. I believe it's coming out in 2020. So it's coming out next year because Jay says he has 3 books coming out next year. Aurora number 2, his new adult series he's starting, and the 3rd book in his Deviate or Lifelike trilogy, whatever. But this is not told in the same way as the Illuminae files. It's not told in mixed media. It is told in a normal storyline format. And, God, how do I describe this? It's a young adult fantasy. That's Aurora. So how do I describe this story? It follows a big group of young adults. They're like 18, 19 age. They've been going to the Aurora Academy for years, I think since they were like 5 or 6. And in the academy, you decide which course you want to study, and there's all these different things you can study to be a certain thing in a job, so that when you graduate, you go in these ships, or you're assigned a ship, and you fill the role that you trained to do. So there is an alpha, which is the leader. So these are the trained leaders and kind of like the captains of these ships, all that kind of stuff. And then you have, oh God, okay, the diplomat. The diplomat is somebody who is well-versed in, I guess I should say the alpha in this story, or in this squad 312, is Tyler. And then the diplomat is his twin sister, Scarlett, and she is, like, the diplomat is somebody who's trained in interpersonal communication, negotiation, stuff like that. So like if they're ever in a bad situation, you want your diplomat to go and negotiate like your release or whatever. Like they're really good with speaking and all that kind of stuff with other people. And then the next one is the scientist, and her name, why can't I remember her name? There's a lot of diversity. She is a mixed race female. Zila. There it is. Zila is the scientist. She is a mixed race female. In the fan art that they have made, she looks to be African American or maybe East Indian, something like that. Like she's got a darker skin tone, but I believe she's African American. I believe. I can't remember the way she's described, but she's definitely diverse. She, like, honestly, I would almost put her on the autism spectrum. With the way her brain functions, she's very narrowly focused. She's all about science and logic. She's not good with human emotion. She's very hard to talk to and deal with. But the scientist is your medic, pretty much. So they know all about, like, medical stuff. They, like, the information keepers. So it's your medic with extra learning in there and, like, knowing about different species and stuff like that. So that's Zila in this book. And then you have the gearhead. The gearhead is your mechanic. And that is Finian. Finian is disabled. He is, he's a different race, like he's an alien race, but I can't remember the name of the alien race, but he had something happen to him when he was younger, so he wears like this exoskeleton-like suit that helps with his mobility and stuff like that, and it's a very high design suit, but he's disabled, and he's always kind of been an asshole, because it's kind of his way of making people not notice his disability. But he's the mechanic, so he's everything mechanical on the ship. And then you have the pilot. The pilot is Kat. She is best friends with Scarlett and has always been in love with Tyler. And so she is exactly what that is. She's a pilot, and they call her Zero because she's never missed a target ever through her entire training. So she's the pilot of Squad 312. And then you have the Warrior. The Warrior is Cal. Cal is an alien race as well. They're described as really pale white skin, almost albino-like skin, with very violet purple eyes and pointed ears with really long hair. And he's an alien race, and Cal is one of those ones, like, he's a warrior. He's bred to kill. Like, he is like your bodyguard, muscle, stuff like that. And then you have Aurora. So, and she's kind of like the misfit mystery girl that they pick up. So the whole premise of this story is Squad 312 is just graduated. Tyler is actually out on, before he gets to pick his squad, because he's like the #1 top of his class for an alpha. And so he knows he gets top pick on his squad. So it's kind of like, almost like a draft. Oh, they do call it the draft. Duh. So they do this draft where he gets, he gets to go first, and so they get to pick their squads. And he goes out on, like, just flying around, kind of like clearing his head the night before, or the night before the morning of the draft. And he comes upon this derelict ship. And the ship is, he gets inside of it, and there's all these pods, like cryogenic pods. And with all these, they're all dead bodies by now. And he finds one that's still alive, which is our girl Aurora. And so he rescues her. And in the process of all this happening, he almost dies. He ends up late and missing the draft. So by the time he gets back, only the ragamuffins or the, people nobody wants are left. And that ends up being his squad, Squad 312. So the story starts out, and he's already kind of grouchy because he kind of got the misfit toys. And they've got Aurora, and once he comes back, there's these people who show up that are kind of like what I would call Earth FBI. So they're like FBI, but for space. And they look really weird. They're wearing like these helmets, so you can't see their faces, and their voices are very disembodied and sound robotic. So it's like almost like, it disguises their identity. And they're looking for Aurora. And Aurora is a girl who's been cryogenically frozen for over 200 years, I think. Yeah, it's over 200 years. So when she was frozen, she's from Earth, and they were out colonizing different planets and stuff out in the Milky Way. And she'd been trained and was going on this mission to go to this planet where her dad was, and leaving her mom and her sister behind. And they were on this trip, so they get cryogenically frozen, so otherwise they'd age and die in the time it takes to get there. And as far as anybody's concerned, that ship blew up or disappeared, or they didn't know what happened to it. And so she's the lone survivor. And from what they've, looked at, there's no reason why she should have survived. Like, she shouldn't have been cryogenically frozen for 200 years. Like, she should have died at some point. Like, everybody else on the ship was dead, even in their pods. So she's kind of an anomaly. And this FBI, function shows up to come take her. And the captain of the Aurora Academy, or the leader, tells Squad 312, take her and run. She's more important than we know. And the story kind of takes off from there. So I really loved this story. I've seen a lot of mixed reviews. There's people who really, really love it. And there's a couple people who are really big fans of Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman who hate it. And I don't understand why they hate it. First of all, it's YA, guys. YA is full of angst. There is a little bit of insta-love, but not really, between two characters. But it's like insta-love that's explained away. So it's kind of like one of those ones where, like, the trope kind of works because there's a good enough reason, and it's explained away because this species of alien, like, they imprint, like, on people, kind of, but it's always somebody of their own race, and it's never happened on a human before, or it's rare. So it's kind of Twilight-y a little bit, but it didn't bother me. Like, I found it kind of cute and endearing. It was kind of like one of those ones where, like, that trope didn't bother me. Usually insta-love does, but this was a different type, like a twist on the trope, so it didn't bother me. I love the camaraderie between the squad, like, and as they do and get into all these, shenanigans together, the way they bond, because they were kind of thrown together, they didn't want to be together, and the fact that by the end, they are a team. I really loved seeing that. The storyline was really interesting. It ended on a fucking cliffhanger because, they're good with that. I don't know, I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I mean, it's Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, and their writing was so easy. It was so easy to get through. You know, it's science fiction light. It's, you know, YA science fiction. Easy to understand. The terms weren't crazy. The backstory was really cool, and you get into some of her backstory and why she was frozen for so long and what happened to the people who were on that ship. It was really cool. I really, really enjoyed it. If you liked Illuminae Files, I suggest you try it. A lot of people that I've seen that are disappointed because they keep comparing it to Illuminae is that in the Illuminae Files, each book focuses on 2 main characters, and you've got a whole bunch of side characters that are just as important. In this story, everybody's together, and some people thought that it wasn't as good because of that, which I disagree. You get varying points of view. Everybody gets a chance to tell their point of view, and it's not jarring because most of the time they're together and the story flows and there's not a lot of repetitiveness, in my opinion. But I loved it. Can't wait for the next book to come out in 2020, and I highly recommend it if you loved the Illuminae Files. The next book I read was a DNF, and I was kind of worried going into it. I was trying to participate in the bingo-a-thon to support Cody. This was the group book, and it pretty much covered everything on the bingo board, and that's Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. This book was awful. The premise is really awesome. The premise that all you need to know is a gender-bent King Arthur retelling in space. I mean, it sounds really cool. It sounds awesome. The one thing I will give this book credit for is the diversity in it is amazing. You have a non-binary character. You have people of color. You have female-female romance. God, what else? I mean, it's very, very diverse. And it touches on a lot of diverse, you know, groups. And it's really, really great. And I really enjoyed that. But it's like one of your basic bitch YA novels. It has every single YA trope you could fucking imagine in this book. It has insta-love. It has, like, where there is no real story. The story doesn't develop because it's moving along at such a breakneck pace, and the romance takes a front seat, and it was so hard to read. Like, it was so formulaic. It was all the stuff that you don't want to see in a YA book anymore. It almost seemed dated, and I had such high hopes, and the cover is gorgeous, but I just couldn't do it. I don't even think I made it 100 pages. I mean, the concept is so fucking cool. Like, Arthur, like, has gone through multiple lifespans. Like, and in this one, he's a girl, and he's, like, the 72nd Arthur to come to life. And once this Arthur, or in this case Ari, gets a hold of Excalibur, it wakes up Merlin, and Merlin is aging in reverse. So he started out as an old man wizard, and right about now he's about like 16, 17, still a wizard. And he was probably like my favorite, but it was just, I stopped after 100 pages. I just couldn't do it. If you like tropey YA, go ahead and give it a shot, but otherwise I just can't recommend it. I gave it 2 stars. Okay, the next one that I read was my other nonfiction. This one I ended up DNFing in the middle, and I feel really bad about it, but I was so excited to read it too, and it was one of my book of the month picks for last month, and that's The Killer Across the Table, Unlocking the Secrets of Serial Killers and Predators with the FBI's Original Mindhunter by John Douglas and Mark Olshaker. This is the guy that the Netflix show was based off of. Mindhunter. The Netflix show Mindhunter was based off of. So this guy he's the creator of FBI criminal profiling. The behavioral profiling, like the movie Silence of the Lambs and the books are taken heavily from him, like a lot of it. I think he said he consulted on it. But the case of Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs was pulled heavily from Dahmer, no, not Dahmer, Gacy, and a couple others. And so this guy, what is it? Is it John? I think it's John. Yeah. No, or is it Mark? Yes, John Douglas. So he consulted on the book and on the movie to make sure they got it right. And, you know, because Clarice is trying to be a behavioral scientist and, like, do all that and, you know, be a profiler. He is the grandfather of FBI criminal profiling. Worked for the FBI for years. So this is a collection of, it's told in like 4 parts. And so he talks about 4 different cases that aren't famous. That isn't like Ted Bundy or What was one of the other ones he talked to? There was a couple other ones that he talked to that were super, the Son of Sam Killer, stuff like that weren't famous ones that were, you know, like a one kill and done, or, you know, stuff like that. So some serial killers or really violent killers that most people don't really know much about. So I read the first story and then I DNF'd. The problem with this book is that he jumps around so fucking much. So if you're going to tell me about this one guy, and his name was like Michael something or other, he brutally murdered a 7-year-old girl in the 70s or 80s, something like that. Maybe it was the early 90s, whatever, it was a long time ago. And so I thought, okay, we're going to get the story of what happened. This girl died, and then him talking about the interview process, how he interviewed him and talked to him, and how he asked his questions and how he does this and that, and then what his profile was and what he deemed him to be. And so the whole start of it is this killer's coming up for parole, and he is called in to interview him and kind of profile him to see if he would be eligible for parole. And the whole thing they want to know is, will he do this again? Will he kill another 7-year-old girl again, or another child of any kind, or kill in general? He jumped around too much. We didn't get, like, the step-by-step, like, how he profiled him and interviewed him and all that stuff. He'd talk about how, the case, like, he'd be talking about, like, what happened to this little girl, and he would get, like, 5 or 6 sentences into that, and then he would offshoot and talk about how this one time when he interviewed the son of Sam Killer, and this one time how he talked to Ted Bundy, and this other time when he was talking to this other FBI guy. It's like, okay, but why does this matter? Now you're starting to get into technical stuff that doesn't fit in with what you're trying to talk about with this one specific murder. Like, it was so confusing, and like it pulled you out, and it made it not make sense, where I felt myself rereading to be like, did I miss something? Like, it was just, and not to mention the way he wrote it, and he sounded very condescending and arrogant. And yeah, you're the grandfather of FBI profiling and behavioral science, but you don't gotta be a dick. Like, obviously, if I'm reading this, not that I know much about it, but I obviously have a vested interest, so you don't have to treat me or talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. You know, it kind of felt like that. So I DNF'd it after the first one. I couldn't follow it. He was too cocky, and just, he couldn't stick to the point. It was like talking to somebody who wants to tell you like 50 different stories, and they can't decide what they want to tell you, so they just jump around constantly. I couldn't handle it. It was too much. It really upsets me, because I was so excited for this. I love true crime books like this. I love stuff about behavioral science. It was such a disappointing read. 2 stars. Like, if you're still interested, maybe give it a shot. Maybe you'll have better luck than me. But I just could not handle this guy's writing voice. And the last book that I finished in May was one that, I guess I should talk about this one first. It was a book I was reading in May. I since carried it over into June. I have about, just about 150 pages left, and that's Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. You'll see this in my June wrap-up for sure. I only have 150 pages left. Absolutely fucking loving it. This is the book that has pulled me out of my slump, or helped pull me out of my slump. But the last book that I finished was my attempt to get out of the slump, because after reading The Five, which I loved, and then I read Aurora Rising, which I loved, and then after reading Once and Future, I was so busy, and starting that when I DNF'd that one, I was like, fuck me, okay, like, now I'm in a slump, and all I want to do is watch TV, and, you know, I'm so busy. So then I picked up The Killer Across the Table. I was like, sweet, I'll read this one, true crime, totally up my alley, haven't read one in a while, and then it was wah wah. So I was slumping so bad. It was getting towards the end of the month. I started feeling the reader guilt because I hadn't really read much. So I decided to kind of sort of cheat a little bit, but it wasn't a TBR jar pick, and read one of my books that I had set aside for June, just kind of get a head start. And I read one of my Richard Lehman ones, and I picked 2, and I read Night Show. So this I rated 3 stars, so it wasn't terrible, but this is one of his older ones. I believe it was made in 1986, I think. Oh no, first published in 1984, the year I was born. This book is 35 years old. So it reads like it's 35 years old. It reads like a B horror movie. The whole premise is there's this guy, what the fuck is his name? Tony? Yeah. There's this guy named Tony, and he is obsessed with scaring people. He loves scaring people. and he wants to get into special effects, like horror special effects, like and makeup and like all that crazy stuff. And so the premise of this book is he moves to Hollywood. He starts stalking this female makeup special effects artist who is like the best in the business and all that kind of stuff. He becomes super obsessed with her. You can tell Richard Lehman did a lot of research on 80s horror effects. That was done really well, but it was super 80s horror movie cheese-tastic goodness. Like, it feel like your horror with a whole huge helping of cheese. This is right up your alley. I mean, it was very quick. It's not even 300 pages. It's like 270 pages maybe. And I mean, look at that font. It's huge. It was an easy breezy read. Didn't quite pull me out of my slump, but it kind of gave me a jump start to be like, okay, small, short, easy, knocked out another Richard Lehman, we're good to go. But yeah, gory as all get out as usual. Lots of talks of butts and boobs as usual. Total Richard Lehman, lots of gratuitous sex, gratuitous violence. Reads like a B horror movie. I wouldn't start with this one, but this one is a fun little kind of cheesy horror book if you're in the mood for one. Okay guys, that's it. That is my May wrap up. This month sucked some ass, as you probably could tell. I hate reading slumps. They're totally terrible. This month was just super slumpy. But June is already starting out way better. My daughter's softball just abruptly ended. We were supposed to do a tournament in a couple weeks, but 5 of our 13 girls decided either they didn't want to play or had something going on or backed out at the last minute even though we were committed. So it abruptly ended yesterday. So now I'll have more time to read, thankfully. And this month is already starting out good. I've got Kings of the Wild that I'm reading, fucking loving it. It is amazing. I only have 150 pages left and I'm done with this one. I've started my buddy reads with Vicky and with my subscriber Cindy. Cindy and I are doing a sci-fi. I'm not going to get too much information about it because we had some stuff happen and we switched some things up. And then Firefly Lane, which I'm reading with Vicky. I've started both of those. Those are both huge books. So I've got 3 big ones. I've already read one. Month is already starting out a lot better. June is starting out a lot better than May was in total. So I'm pretty excited about that. I do have, 6 more books on my TBR. I am going to pull The Clockmaker's Daughter from my TBR because I watched April's wrap up from Getting Hygge with It, and she read it and she said that it's not a good Kate Morton to start with. I have never read Kate Morton before. Both her and Vicky agree I should probably start with like The Secret Keeper or something like that because this one wasn't like her strongest in their opinion. So I trust them both. So I'm going to set that one aside and I will, read like The Secret Keeper or whatever first before I do The Clockmaker's Daughter. But I hope to get through the other 5 on my TBR for June and maybe a couple extra. Maybe this will be a great reading month knowing my track record. I always do really great to start and then it's like meow and then I totally blow up like midway through the month and it's like, oh my god, the end of the month I've only read 3 things. What the hell's happening? Because my life is chaos and I can't be, at least I'm consistently chaotic. There's that. But yeah, that's it guys. So please let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts were on them. Please like and subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.